lucky people, you got a treat today. We're so glad to be here, and I am with my wonderful friends, Mr. Peter Stout and the wonderful Diana Shine. So good to be together.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon in some of your cases. I see Debbie from South Carolina. Good afternoon, Debbie.
So good to see everybody here. It's fun. It's so fun. We can see your comments coming up and just seeing people signing in from all over the world and all over the United States, all over Canada. So welcome to the show today. We've got a really good show and we got quite a bit to get through. We value your time. I know everybody's excited to have Diana. Diana, did you just want to share just maybe like, what are you going to teach today? What's the subject?
Well, the subject is water, which is such a huge subject. So I just have a few points about water because it would take weeks to teach everything about water, and half the stuff I don't know too, because it's such a huge concept. But what I do know, I'm sharing with you in just a few pointers and slides, and then we'll get right to a demonstration. My favorite water is rivers, so I'm demonstrating a river today, and it'll be really fun. Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. We are so excited, Diana, and I know everybody will be looking forward to that. So before we get to Diana's thing, I'm just going to walk through a couple slides with you all. We'll just take a few minutes. Now, I know everybody, sometimes what happens is people get a little bit antsy. They're like, hey, we want to start. But just remember that you're not the only person here, and there's other people that might really appreciate the information that we share, because this is a workshop. There's places that are helpful for you to go. And, so this will only take 10 minutes, maybe even less if I can get through it faster. But this is session 2 of a workshop, right? And today, of course, is Diana teaching about water. Just a few simple key things that you can remember. And I just want to ask this question right now. Who is excited to learn from Diana today? Raise your hand, shout it out in the comment section, and just let us know, because I know that I'm excited to listen to Diana, and I know that you are too, but shout it out. I want to just see a few things. And as you're shouting it out, I'll keep going. Just a reminder that each session is going to be about 90 minutes total. We want to honor your time, and that means we'll have instruction, demonstration, prizes, and a Q&A. Remember too that the replays are available throughout the duration of the workshop, and you can find everything that you need here at this domain, thelandscapeworkshop.com. thelandscapeworkshop.com, or you can go to acrylicuniversity.com and you can click the link that's right there for you. So this is just a little bit of a trick question I had for you, because I was like, I want to see if anybody remembers the hashtag. If you are going to post on social media, which I did see some come in, and I love seeing that. What is the hashtag? Does anybody know? And I thought that there's going to be some people out there who are going to throw out some funny hashtags, I'm sure. But I was thinking it'd be kind of fun to see them. So throw that out there right now too. I see everybody saying love rivers. Yes, excited. I always appreciate Diana's teaching. Yes, can't wait. Definitely excited. So we know that. And I'll see these things as they're coming through. But this is the real hashtag. I don't know who is. Yeah, there I see a couple of good ones. AU Summer, hashtag AU Summer. Good job, everybody. Woo, look at that. Okay, so good job. I also want to congratulate you guys. We have great submissions. I saw somebody asking. I'm going to switch real quick here, because I saw somebody asking, and I just want to show you real fast where you can go to see this. And so if you're here at the Landscape Workshop dashboard, you can go right here to submit paintings. It's a little link right here. Click on that. And if you click this button, it's going to pull up this page right here. And this is the landscape submission form. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab you can upload your image, your information right here, and you can come down here and you can start to see all these beautiful paintings that people have done. You can click on them. You can see something else about what they wrote, and then you can click on it again if you want to see an even bigger image. And so this is really fun. It's a way that we can see what everybody else is doing. And when you get to the bottom of this, it keeps going. So you can keep looking. There's over 200 submissions here. And anyways, I just wanted to show you that real fast because I know that that's a question mark every once in a while for people. And so let me get back to this, and we're basically going to hand this over. Are you guys ready for Diana? Shout it out in the chat when you're ready. These are the things I love to hear. Are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. I was born ready. And we're going to hand it over to Diana. So everybody, welcome, Diana. Glad that you are here. I'm going to drop off, and Diana's going to come, and we'll share from her presentation. So Excellent. Thank you guys for being here. I love it.
All right, I'm going to hand it over to Diana. Do a quick little introduction. Go for it, Diana.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm so excited to share this information with you. My materials are listed on the side of this page. If you can't read them, they're also in the materials list. And I just want to tell you one little thing. I went to do my demo and I was out of cadmium yellow light. So I used cadmium yellow medium. But if you purchase cadmium yellow light, your paintings will still come out okay. They'll still be fine. Don't worry about it. But I just want, Peter, do you want to just get right to the teaching, and then we'll get going?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here, and hope you enjoy.
I'm going to talk to you for just a few minutes about some keys to painting water. When you look at water, when you see water from different angles, and what water does in different lights. And that will help you make some decisions about your paintings, how you want to simplify, the kind of brush marks you want to use, the kind of colors you choose. So let's get started talking about keys to painting water. One of the common mistakes people make when painting water is they assume that water is always blue. I think the reason we make that assumption is because so often we go to bodies of water on beautiful days when the sun is shining and the sky is blue. Well, that's going to guarantee some blue water. But let's talk about color of water that is beyond the blue. It's like a big mirror, but not a mirror you hold up to your face that directly reflects things side to side. It's a mirror that lays on the ground and reflects everything above it. So if there are trees arching over this mirror, it's not going to be blue. In fact, if there's no blue in the sky, there's not going to be any blue in the water. It also reflects whatever is above it. So in this photo on the right, we can see that the water is reflecting the underside of the bridge, the bottom, and we can't see any of the side of the bridge in the reflection. Over on the left, we can see that our mirror is just reflecting the tops of these trees because there's a big bunch of grasses in the way of the bottoms of the trees, so our mirror doesn't have a chance to reflect those. While talking about these reflections, the smoother the water is, the more accurate the mirror image. We do not see this mountain because the mountain is too far back. It's set too far back to be reflecting in something that's looking straight up. And reflections are no longer mirror-like, but they distort when there's ripples in the water. The more ripples, the more distortion. Let's look at something else reflections do. I'm going to turn this photo to black and white for just a minute. We can already see that the water isn't blue, it's green. And that's because there's a huge cliff of trees towering above this water. When I turn the water to black and white, I want you to notice the value, that means the darkness and lightness of the reflections in the water. Reflections of light and mid-value objects like this cliff and this tree reflect a little bit darker in the water. Reflections of dark things like these big holes in the rocks and these dark spaces in the trees reflect a little bit lighter in the water. And this is usually what happens. Here we can see that this trestle bridge is reflecting a bit darker in the water because it's mid-value. Here's another aspect about reflections that you should know. If you didn't already, you probably did, but they always come straight down. Reflections come straight down towards the viewer and do not go off to the side. However, shadows follow the path of the sun and can go any direction that the sun goes. So once again, we can see reflections drop straight down from the item reflecting, while shadows follow the path of the sun. One other thing you should take note of is that reflected sky will usually gradate from lighter to darker. You can see it here. I took this little piece off from lighter to darker. The reflected sky in the water is darker than the sky itself. And that is a number of reasons. Number one, that light sky is reflecting darker. Number two, this reflection is receiving the sky much higher up in the dome of the sky, which is much bluer, and the water is very deep. And deep water is actually a little bit darker. We'll talk about that in a minute. The tree reflections here are a lot lighter than the tree that's casting those reflections. You can just barely see a change in the color of the water in these tree reflections. But the cast shadows, the shadows being cast off those trees, have very hard edges, very crisp and distinct, and they are in line with the direction of the sunlight. The reflections we're looking at are also distorted by ripples in the water, making them very soft-edged and hard to see. When we're talking about reflections, we need to talk about the angle at how the water is being viewed. Sorry, tongue twist. Here I've put some rocks and water in a little pie plate, and I'm stepping back and viewing it at an angle. And when you see the water at an angle, you see how crisp and clear the reflections are. When I look down deep inside the pan, I'm looking through the water at the bottom, and the reflections are now fuzzy and not clear. We can see this in these two photos I took just minutes apart on the same day of some ducks. The first one on the top, you can see I'm standing on the shore looking out across, and the reflections are nice and crisp and clear. On this one on the bottom, I'm standing on a short wall staring down into the water, and the water is no longer blue. It's kind of gunk colored. It's the color of the algae on the bottom of the rocks, and the reflections are very minimal at best. Depending on the depth of the water and the angle you're looking at the water, you can see what's under the water, what's in the water, and what's reflected on the surface of the water. And depending on the depth of the water, sometimes a reflection can reveal the shallow river bottom by blocking out the shinier rays of light. Here's 9 ideas about reflections on water. Number 1, dark values reflect lighter in the water. I should say dark values usually reflect lighter in the water. Nature can do all kinds of stuff, but this is what normally happens. Light values usually reflect darker in the water. Colors in reflections are diminished in intensity. It means they're more grayed down. They're usually in the same color family as the item reflected, but a little bit less intense color. The reflection of a thing will grow longer and more distorted if the water is slightly choppy. The smoother the water is, the more it's like a mirror image, and reflections drop straight down from top to bottom, while shadows follow the path of the sun. The viewer can usually see the river bottom through shallow water. And finally, 9, reflections are clearer when they're viewed at a distance. Let's look at some other things that create different colors in water, and this is impurities, like sediment, runoff, minerals, algae. Have you ever seen the runoff of a glacier into a mountain stream? It's really beautifully turquoise. There are all kinds of things that can change the overall color of water. Depth can also affect the color of water. When you're looking at bodies of water from above, you can see through the water to the sand or rocks below if the water's shallow. Pure water is clear, but sunlight doesn't penetrate beyond certain depths. Shallow water usually shows the sands, rocks, or plants that are under the surface, but they're generally a little browner or greener than the dry rocks on top. But deep water is darker and cooler in temperature than shallow water. Here you can see my little swimming hole. The shallow water looks brown and greenish, while the deep water looks turquoise, and you can really tell that that water is quite a bit deeper. In this image on the left, I'm standing on a high bridge looking down a steep canyon to a very, very deep river. And the canyon shelves along the edge of this river show me just how deep it is. Here, in the shallow water, sunlight penetrates the water and bounces back that soft brown, wet rock color. In the middle depth, the sunlight penetrates through the water, bounces back up, and it looks green. That rock shelf has a greenish look. It shows us that it's quite a bit deeper. And finally, in the deepest water, the sunlight can't bounce back. The sunlight goes down, but it's too deep to make the trip back, so the water is a dark blue-green. Over here on the right, you can see that there isn't any deep water. We can clearly see the rocks underneath, but we can tell which water is shallower and which water is deeper simply by the coolness, the blue-greenness of the water. This is a little creek with shallow water, and the sand and rocks under the water are wet, and they are covered in a grayish-green, gunky algae. So they're darker and somewhat warmer, like a browny green, warmer in color. If you've ever seen Monet's water lily paintings, you'll notice he's got a lot of this gunky green color behind his water lilies as well. But these rocks are warmer in color, browner or greener than their dry counterparts. And in the summer, when this creek dries to a little trickle, all those green rocks will dry out and they will turn as light and white as the dry ones on the side right now. Here are 2 paintings done by master painters that kind of describe what's happening here. In this painting on the left by John Singer Sargent, we can see that his rocks in the shallows are greenish browny color, but we can tell they're wet. As our eyes track across the water, it gets cooler and more turquoise, and we can tell that it's getting deeper. And finally, as our eyes track across this little pond, we begin to see reflections, which means that we're starting to see out across the water. The same thing's happening here in William F. Reese's painting. The logs appear to be half in and half out of water because half of them is green and half of each log is yellow. And that kind of shows that part of the log is dry and part is wet. These rocks in the shallows are that greeny, gunky, gorgeous brown color. We see the reflections as our eyes track out across the water. So we know that deeper water is a darker color, darker than the sky. And shallow water is a lighter value. Maybe not lighter than the sky, but a lighter value. Here where the water is quite smooth, it's just wet sand, we can see it reflects the sky more accurately. Here where the water is a little deeper and roughened up with waves, it's a little bit darker. And where the waves push the sand up, we can see this brown sand is curling up inside the wave, creating a completely different color in this close wave that doesn't occur in this farther wave. And finally, we're going to look at ripples and moving water. Moving or rough water creates a really distorted reflection. Here I took these two photos just in the same 5 minutes in the same place on the Wenatchee River. In one, there's almost a photographic reflection. In the other, a little breeze picked up just a few minutes later. And I took this second picture, and we can see that my beautiful, almost photographically realistic reflection has just been changed to a mess of little wiggly lines. Let's see how that works. There's a whole science to this in physics, and when I looked up ripples on water, I got all this physics stuff, and it was fascinating, and I read through it, and there's particular words for everything that happens. But we don't need to know them right now because it's not important to our painting. But just know when we're looking at still flat water, there is an angle that the object hits the water and reflects back into your eye, and it creates a single image. Here's my shorthand for stuff: a mountain, some rippling waves, a blue sky, and a sun. Now, every time the waves bend towards the mountain, a reflection of the mountain shows up. Where the waves bend towards this sun, a reflection of the sun shows up. And wherever the waves flatten out or bottom out, reflection of the blue sky is going to show. What that means is that you're going to have a whole mess of little rippling images. Here I've made some ripples out of aluminum foil. Of course, water is more complex because it's see-through. You might be able to see the bottom of things, but I just did this so you can see how ripples work. I'm wearing a red jacket. You can see that everywhere a ripple turns toward me, my red jacket shows. It extends the reflection of my jacket. Everywhere the ripple turns away from me, the red jacket doesn't show. Now I'm going to put my orange paint apron in back behind there and take off my red jacket. So I'm just wearing a black shirt. And you can see the reverse is happening. The orange is hitting every wave that's facing it, and every wave that's facing my black shirt is black. And this is kind of what's happening with waves too, but in a much more complicated way because everything's in motion. So how do you decipher this for painting? Well, there's really an easy way. In the background, things are much more simple and small. So in the background of your water, you can simply pick a couple of really common colors and use small horizontal brush strokes to represent that movement. In the foreground, pick the colors of the reflection and use wider, larger strokes and follow the movement of the water to create those larger strokes and the ripples and movement of them. Just follow it along right with your brush. Here again, use smaller horizontal strokes for water in the background and larger, wider strokes for the water in the foreground. This is a painting by British artist John Hammond, and we can see he does this smaller horizontal brush marks in the background, larger brush marks that follow the rippling movement, that follow the movement of the water, and that have more of the reflection in them in the foreground. You can see this again. He's done it in this pond. Same thing. Smaller, more horizontal brush strokes in the back, more color, more movement, wider, broader brush marks that follow the ripples in the foreground. Here we can see the exact same procedure done by Claude Monet. If you look at other artists' artwork, you can see that they have adopted this, just simplifying the background and keeping those ripples and the movement of the water more towards the front. But now let's talk for a moment about moving water, because many people have asked me, they want to do waves or waterfalls, or even to show the current in water. One of the things we want to see is that the water is moving, but it doesn't just move in a straight line. In a river like this, there's all kinds of rocks and impediments along the way. So the water is moving in one direction, but it also curls and eddies back. And that is a good time and a good place to use some brushwork here. But don't make those things white. Make sure that they are very, very softly rendered, and save your white marks for the bits of foam and flecks of sunlight popping on the surface of the water. When you're rendering waterfalls, be aware of the movement of the water and keep your brush moving that direction. But also remembering that the water will eddy and circle back and create ripples. As you're putting your brush marks down, just be aware of the movement of the water. The water itself is flowing in a more organic way. So just being aware of the fact that there are things happening in the water, movements happening. You can keep your brushwork moving and lively as well. And one last thing I wanted to show you before we start painting is that waves and waterfalls, foamy white water has shadows. Look at how dark the shadow is on this wave. Look at how dark the shadow is on this waterfall. Even waves that are backlit have shadows, and shadows give them form and depth. So don't forget about putting shadows in your white moving water. Here are the 9 takeaways for reflections on water. I'm not going to say them out loud. I'm just going to turn them on so you can do a screenshot of them if you want. And to review a few of the other things, remember water reflects whatever is above it, except when you're viewing it at different angles, the angle of the viewer changes how reflections are seen. Deep water is darker and cooler in color than shallow water. Try to be aware of the flow and the movement of moving water. And finally, even foaming waterfalls and waves have shadows. So look for those items as you're painting. Of course, as an artist, you get to interpret what you want and what you want your viewers to see and what you want to paint. These are just ideas that you can follow, but I want you to remember this last thing. Always trust your eyes. What I've just told you are generalities, but nature is full of surprises. Every time you go out in nature, every time you really, really look, you'll see all kinds of beautiful, unusual, interesting things that seem to break all the rules. But nature is in charge, so trust your eyes. I can't wait to get started painting with you. So let's get started. Here's the reference photo, the paints, and the materials I'll be using for this demo today. This is a river that's very dear to my heart. I grew up near it and spent a lot of my time in childhood playing in it and near it. So let's start with a little sketch. I'm fast forwarding through this sketch because it's not a real accurate sketch. I'm just placing elements where I think I'd like them to be on my canvas. I'm using a 12 by 16 inch canvas, and it's a little longer than my image. And now I'm just taking some watered down orange that I've mixed with my red and yellow, and I'm creating a wash to cover the entire image once it's sketched in lightly. Now this wash is going to act as a value placement. It's my mid value, and I'm taking a paper towel, dampened, to wipe away everywhere on the image where I'd like to have a lighter area, a light value area, like the top of the rocks. So nothing like a little finger painting to get me through the day, but I will do anything to get those whites located on my canvas. Just in general, I'm going to use paint and all kinds of methods to get those more accurate as I go. But right now, I just want to find where things are light. And I'm mixing a dark color, a dark purple, from my 2 blues and my red. There's still a bunch of water on my brush, so I'm going to use that to spread this dark around. Oh, there was some glare on my canvas, so I fixed the lighting. That helps. And I feel like all the drama in this painting will be brought out when I really can discover what the values are without really worrying about the colors at this point. There's so many greens and beautiful, beautiful shades of green in this painting, but if I don't get the values right, the whole thing will fall apart. And I like to do this underpainting on almost all my paintings because it really helps me set the composition, see if the composition is going to work before I put all the time into mixing colors and putting my colors down. It saves me time, energy, money, work. It's a great tool to see if my composition is going to work. I want to make sure that I have created unequal divisions of spaces between elements, that the rocks are different sizes and shapes, and that the water flows in an organic and beautiful way across this. Now I'm just adding some whites to emphasize my white highlights. That little rock in the back might end up being the focal point because it is the darkest dark against the lightest light. Now I'm going to mix color, and I'm starting with my medium green that's just ultramarine blue and yellow mixed 50-50. And to darken it, I am going to add my ultramarine and phthalo to create a darker blue-green. And I can just keep darkening it with more blue. But now I'm going to mix a little purple because some of those colors in the background are a purpley, darky, greeny color. The lighter color I am mixing from phthalo and yellow because that's going to give me a really sparkling, bright green. Now, for my mid values, I think the green is a little bluer than what I have, so I'm adding blue and white. So it remains the same value. It's just a little cooler and bluer. I also see in this image some browny green, so I'm mixing a little bit of orange right between the red and yellow and putting that orange into the green, and that is going to create a brown-green color. I like to keep these colors in a basic color wheel so that I can really know how I mix the color, what I mixed the colors from, and where I can just take my paintbrush to get them. This is that orangey brown color that's on the rocks, and so I mixed a nice orange, and I'm adding just a drop of purple to it to drop the intensity of the color so that it's a brown orange, warm with a lot of yellow and red in there, but not quite as bright as just pure orange. And finally, for my pre-mixing, I see some light blue. I'm going to add some white to this blue. Oh, that might be a little too light. I'll try mixing a little more blue to that. And let me test it out first. Just using my color shaper, which is kind of like a rubber spatula. You can get that at in any art store. And I'm just testing out some areas. I can see that my darks are still too wet to paint over. So I'm going to just start using some of these colors that I built up. I'm going to lighten that orange a little bit. for the rock and my color shaper, and I'm just going to block in some colors where I see them in my photograph, where I feel like they ought to be in the painting. I'm just blocking in those orangey light colors for the rocks. And then once those are blocked in, I'll start with some greens. And I see that there's some reflections right here I want to pay attention to when I get there. And now I'll just pop in a little bit. I added some orange to the green so it looks like a reflection down from that orange rock. And now I see some darks. And really, I am going from big ideas to small ideas, from general ideas about value and shape to more specific. I won't get into details until the very end of the painting. Let's see if that color works now. I'm going to put it in where I see it in the image. And oh yeah, I like that color. We'll see once I get it, most of that orange underwash covered up, we'll be able to see it more accurately. But I do like a little bit of that orange warmth popping through all that green. I like the idea of it. Now I'm switching to a number 10 flat brush. I put it on my hand so you can see how big it is. It's about an inch. And I am using this wide brush to really push the paint around so I can get through this lay-in process. I'm trying to find where the light, medium, and dark values in green are all going to go in this water. And I'm using some really simple brush marks just to lay the paint in right now. And I will find better mark making as this paint dries and I go along. And I'm really just referring to my photograph to see where the reflections in the water are, using my finger to kind of smudge and blend the paint a little bit and to soften edges. Now that upper paint has dried a bit and I can cover it with really dark, it's a really shadowy dark area. So I'm kind of putting the green, the dark green and the dark purple side by side and not letting them mix too much. If they mix a lot, they're going to look black. If they go side by side, they'll look a little bit silvery back there, which is what I want. There. Oh, I like the value of that in the back. And there are some branches hanging down. While this is still wet, I'm going to get just an indication of that shape hanging down, and it'll blend right now. There's also a really bright green moment here at the base that's grasses that I'm going to overlay and draw down some of it. The reflection is a little darker in the water. There, I'm using my finger to soften the edge again. And back to putting in my big values. All I'm doing with the brush, instead of swishing it, is I'm just wiping it with a paper towel between values. If I switch colors dramatically, I will swish the brush in water. But right now, I just wipe it between different values. If that, sometimes I want those colors to remain on my brush so that they blend together. I see a darker browny dark color in the shadow on the rocks. So I just mixed my orange and my purple together to create a darker shadow color for those rocks. I can see that there's some purple in the shadows, so I just added some of that purple in there. There's also this blue, these rocks in shadow back here that are appearing blue to my eye. And they're really a beautiful shadowy blue color back there. So I'm just going to indicate that with this strip of color right now, a little bit of its darker counterpart as a reflection below. And here there is like where the water's getting shallow, I see that it's not green anymore. It's a greeny orange. It's a murky color. And I want to indicate that murky color with a green orange thing. Get a few more of those darks in. And I'm seeing a color at the base of this that I really want to get. It's a silvery color. It's kind of not purple and not green and not blue. So I normally really stick to keeping my colors on my palette in a color wheel, but I kind of used up all the space in the purple area. So whoops, I'd have to use what's available there. Oh dear. But I do really love this silvery reflective area down below. So I love this color and I really want to find it. I don't think that's quite it yet, but I have more layers of color to go and more hurdles to jump. But first I want to get all of the areas covered that in the right value, all of that underwash covered up. And then I will start thinking about layers and layers and layers of color, layers of texture that I'll use to help me find how to create the feel of the flow of water in this painting. There, I think this is going to need to go a little darker so that when I start to put the sparkles on the water, they'll show up. Find some of that movement of the current through there. By adding a little of this blue and white into the wet green. And I've just made it a little more purple. And it's funny, but even with these gloves, I can feel if the paint is wet or not. So I test frequently to see if the paint is dried enough to lay on another color. I really rely on the drying time of acrylics to help me with this more layered approach to painting. Once I find all the main colors in this story, I'll go back and I will sketch in those lower rocks, but I'm still really layering up the main colors that I need to create the feel of this water as it moves downstream through the river. I'm using my brush really softly and just dragging paint across. I'm dragging wet paint across dry paint, and it gives a little bit of a nice texture there. I'm switching to a small brush, a number 0 round, and I'm going to use that little tiny number 0 round brush to sketch in these rocks that I want in a little bit more detail in the lower part of this painting, in the shallow water. And again, I'm not going for absolute photographic representation. I want to create some rocks in here that will just feel nice and chunky and block the flow of water and give a little feeling of perspective from larger to smaller rocks. Something for that little block of grasses to grow on. Something to catch the light. I love the little dapples of light and shadow on those rocks as well. So I want to get the light and shade. I will cover up all of my dark lines eventually. And I'm going to need to find the color of that glare that's on the water. It's really quite beautiful. So now it's just a matter of finding the lost and soft and hard edges of these rocks and finding the path of the light as it crosses across them. I'm just getting a light that's warm. It has a peach note into it. I mixed white into that orange color so that my white has a very warm, peachy note to it. Finding more little ways of putting light into this area. It's that difference between shadow and light, and the difference between dark and light that gives beauty and drama to this place. And right now I've got a lot of mid-tone stuff, so we're gonna work on finding where the light is, where the darker notes are. And I'm creating a black with my red, my yellow, and my blue that is really going to get in there and be very dark. And I am using my little brush like a pencil. I kind of have a real tight grip on it right now. I need to get back on my brush a bit, but oh well. It's so easy to do, to get such a tight grip. So I'm moving to a wider brush. This is a number 8 bright. It has shorter tips, and I'm going to use this bright to really get some paint and push it around. I can use the flat edges of the brush to move sideways, and I can use the thin edge of the brush to make fine lines, and that's going to get me away from getting too tiny detailed with that little tiny number 1 or number 0 round that I was holding. So I'm going to mix up that dark green once again and get it on the end of my brush and really find those horizontal brush marks in the further parts of the water. Remember, I talked about those horizontal marks as a way to represent the ruffled water, the riffled up water, and the movement of water. So I'm using the flat tip of the brush to create those little horizontal marks. And as I move my paint forward, I'll flip my brush on its side and use the flat of the brush as I come more forward in space. But right now you can see how those little horizontal marks are making the water look like it has a little breeze on it. I'm also using that edge of the brush to create a softer edge in the reflections, because when there's a little breeze, when the water is disturbed, the reflections are disturbed as well. Now I'm turning my brush on its side and using the wider angle to create wider marks. Oop, that doesn't go there. We need to take that off. I don't even know why I dipped into that color. It happens. I can also use the very edge, the very tip edge of the brush for small details of shadow back in that area of rock, way in the back there. Now I need to address this little thing. I didn't even cover up that yet. There, I just need to find that color of the muddy water that doesn't have glare on it. Little reflections in there. The details will come later. I want to make sure that I have those beautiful, obscure, muddy, slimy colors in the shallows. A little dark. Now it's time for more detail. I'm probably about halfway into this painting, and I feel like I need to slow down a bit and now start really looking at this and thinking about getting more nuanced with the color. Here I'm changing that more orange color to a greenier brown and finding where the water and the rocks hit. Oh, that might not be quite right, but I'll fix it in a minute. It seems too hard-edged right there, but I need to go in and just leave that as a layer, and I'll fix it in a bit. Get some softer edges through here as the water runs between those rocks. It gets very soft looking. As I focus and concentrate more on the detail, I probably go more and more radio silent because I really have to think through some of these strokes. And sometimes my mouth and my brain don't work very well together as I get farther and deeper into a painting. But I'm looking for those parts on the rock that are in shadow and the parts on the rock that are maybe halfway between shadow and light. I want to get the bright light highlights, but I'm also looking for those turning planes and the little flecks of shadow and light there. That's dry now. Just needed to touch it and make sure it wasn't going to lift up. If it's still really wet, I'll just mess it up when I try to put paint on it. So I'm getting a really rich, dark purple color because I want to make that area just fall back into shadow. And I'm layering the green, a warmer green, against that purple color to create some interest, vibration, and depth in a dark space that's really a calm, quiet space in the painting. there, still a little lighter still. One of the nice things about having my palette in a color wheel is I know exactly where I stashed all my colors. I know where the colors are that I used for different parts of the painting. If you don't have a system for your palette, I suggest it, because it doesn't have to be a color wheel. It can be whatever system works for you. But it's really helpful to find the colors that I've been working on, know where they are, know they're in good shape, know how I can mix. Now I can pick them up and lay them side by side when I want to blend and when I want to mix color. That's really helpful to me. These are all still really wet up here, and I can blend those branch shapes and the shadow shapes and keep them really soft edged and have a little bit more mystery back there than in the foreground. Oh, there still is a little touch of glare on the painting right there, but that is a problem I'll have to solve another day because I'm halfway through this painting. There's that reflection. Now I'm finding it. A little bit of that soft sky reflection color or whatever that is. A little bit of glare on the water. I've switched to a number 4 flat brush, and I'm not quite sure why I did it, but it just felt right. So what I'm using it for is smaller brush strokes in the rocks to create the turning planes and transition planes in the color of the rock, to make it turn from light to shadow, and to find some of that orangey, mossy color that's on those rocks. They're starting to feel like they have light on them. And that's what I'm after. There's some of that orange color that's on them that I really love. And then here in the shallow water, let's see, I'll wait just a minute to get some detail in there. Get a little bit more something happening on these rocks before I get into that shallow water a bit. It's fun to get down to these smaller brush marks and smaller details. But I always have to watch myself because I can just cover the whole painting with little details and forget what the big idea of the painting is. And the big idea of this painting is the flow, is the water, that beautiful green water flowing down through the river that I would love to capture. So I feel like this area where the water is riffled up, I maybe got it a little too green. So I'm going in for some more of a purpley color. Not really blue, it's a more soft violet color of that glare color that I got before. And that's going to give me a color that I can lay the bright white sparkles on later on. I'm planning for those sparkles now. And saving my really bright whites for when I add a little bit of sparkle texture. This is my color shaper. It's like that spatula I was saying, and I'm using it really a light touch on it so it drags the paint and leaves a textural surface on the top of the painting. And I'm really just going from lighter to darker, darker to lighter, layering. This isn't what every artist does. It's what I do. Some artists like to put their brush marks side by side. Oops. I really don't like that really dark mark right there. It looks like I just made a ring around the rock. It looks really like an outline there. By softening that edge, the rock and the water kind of fuse in the light there. This is the fun part for me. This is really exciting to see that my little marks, you make a little mark and it either fails or succeeds. And you can really see that each little mark now is either adding to or taking away from the whole image. I'm really trying to find the planes of the rocks and give them a little more sculptural something. That shadow doesn't belong there. It needs to come away. Now I'm really just trying to find movement with my hand, movement of the water. And I keep going back over spaces with just tiny little bits of different colors to find those movements. Movement in the trees, lifting upwards, movement in the water, movement of some of the subtle branches in the trees. Here, I need to do something. What do I need to do? I'll figure it out. Now, I'm dragging some lighter colored paint across the surface of that with my color shaper, and it's just dragging across some of the colors I already put in there, and it's really getting that bumpy water look that I wanted to get with texture. Wiggle up that reflection a little bit more. I keep thinking I need more light. Am I right or not? I don't know, but I'll add it. If I don't like it, I'll take it away. There, I'm starting to get the movement that I like, and the movement in the trees. And I'm using the edge of my color shaper to dig in through that paint to create more texture. This paint is going to dry a little bit darker, so it will add to the texture and the shadow that's there. Now this is that bluish color that I'm adding to the riffling water. It's not the lightest light yet. I'm getting a few more of those horizontals in. These last little touches almost seem like I'm not doing anything, but they add just a little bit more depth and more interest into the images. Mixing up a nice lavendery, purpley blue color here. I see in just some little ripples. A few more darks. There I needed to add a little bit more white to my palette. And these tiny touches just take so much time. But I'm just about done with all the little stuff. Then I'll be ready to put in the white sparkles and a few more finishing items. I'm absolutely loving painting today and loving the feel of painting this moving water and loving the way that it feels like it's moving in the picture. I like these solid, hard, stationary objects against the moving water. Now I'm switching to my little brush again because I'm going to do a few details in the shallow, just a couple little shadow marks and a couple little highlight marks will make it look like there are rocks under the surface of the water. This time I'm holding the right end of the brush. Not got quite such a tight grip down on the ferrule of the brush this time, which is probably better. A little bit of a light mark there. Just a moment where you can see the top of a rock under the water. And now maybe just a little more movement. I love that little tiny patch of green grass coming out from between the rocks. I think that's still a little too wet to put the last sparkles on. I really have to wait until that water area is completely dry, or it'll just turn into a big smudgy mess. I have to be patient. And there, I need to get a little bit of that green back into the water. Now I'm mixing up some white with a little touch of this cadmium yellow, and it's going to make a really warm white sparkle on the top of the water. Those sparks will stand out when I put them in. They'll look different than everything else up there. And that's kind of what I've been holding back for almost an hour here, is those warm white sparkles across the surface. I used to call it sparkle time when I lived by a bay. Every time at the same time of day in the summer, the bay would light up in a million little yellow sparks. It was so beautiful. And that's what I've been waiting for with this, is to get those sparkles in. There's a little bit more green that I lost. Some of my rich green color up here. I got to get it back. And I'm just using the lightest touch on my brush to do it with. Just a dragged color across the surface so that there's so many layers of color under there. A little more texture in the trees. Keeping it loose and soft in there so it disappears up into the shadow. Finding those little flicks of light just on a few little branches. And I think I'm done for now. I'll wait for another day or so to see if I'm really done. But I think this is all I can do on it until I've really sat back and had a good look.
Wow. Thank you, Diana. I just love watching the comments during one of your presentations because it's just so good to see how it affects people. So
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. And guys, we're gonna have a time for Q&A in a little bit. If you did have a question that maybe you didn't ask, or maybe you didn't get a chance to get it answered, there will be a time for Q&A. But yeah, I have good news here, Diana. Renee actually found a screenshot of your 9.
Yay!
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. I meant to do it, and sometimes things just
No, so yes,
Thank
that's
you, Renee.
wonderful.
She's amazing.
Yeah. So guys, I'm gonna jump into this real quick. I'll show you this, because here you can take a screenshot now. Peter, you want to make this big? Okay, guys, I'll get out of the way. Take a screenshot, and this is the 9 ideas for you there. You can grab these, and I've also already put them on the dashboard. They are there on Diana's day number 2. You can see them there, and that way, either place, whether we're able to get a screenshot here or not. Remember, all the replays, reference photos, supply lists, homework, everything that you need is right here on the Landscape Workshop. And we always want you to paint courageously. So, the tendency for us oftentimes, I know when I go to a workshop or I'm seeing what other people are doing, or an instructor, I get kind of like, oh, I'm intimidated a little bit. And I think, that's where we need to, continue to remind ourselves that our journey is our own journey. And we just need to take the next step in front of us. Your homework for this one, that says session 1, but it's session 2 homework is just to do the same thing that you did before. And I just want to say that there is not a specific deadline for this, except for by next Monday, you have to have all 3 in. If whatever you turn in, you have that many chances of winning, right? If you do all 3, you get 3 chances of winning. You'll just multiply your chances of winning something on the final prize day. And you're just going to paint a water scene, either the one that Diana provided and that you saw her demonstrate, or your own, and then just go to the dashboard, upload it there, and share your work on social media with #AUSummer. We are here at this giveaway, and so I'm going to do this real quick here where I can pull up my wheel of names. Okay, let's do this. We're going to do the wheel of names here. Who is ready to see if you won a $100 gift card for today? I hope that you're excited. Diana, Peter, you guys excited for this?
Yes.
Oh no, this is my worst nightmare. Oh no. It's a one name person, Verna. Like, there's no way to verify. If your name is Verna, I'll tell you what, you can text in. That's a rare enough name that you might be the only Verna, but I'm going to run this one more time. And I'm going to try to get somebody who, this is why it's important to put your first and your last name on a form like this, so that we can get you. Oh, no way. Oh my goodness. This is honestly my very worst nightmare. Oh my goodness.
Oh man, what are the odds?
Oh goodness. This is crazy. This is crazy. Okay, well, I'm gonna do it one more time. No, I should do it another time. Anyways, Verna or Paris, if you are here and you're watching right now and you email us, Peter, can you put up that? Can you put
yes,
up that,
yes, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. I go through that sometimes and try to weed out things if I see like single names like that, but usually there aren't that many, and I obviously I missed a couple, but that's amazing. I can't believe that happened twice in a row.
That is funny, man.
Oh, that's so funny. That is so funny. Okay, I'm pulling up this thing here. And okay, so wonderful, wonderful. I also wanted to say that while it is time for the Q&A now, I am going to do something special for today also. And now this is just like an extra bonus prize. That's funny. That looks so crazy. But I'm going to show you guys this painting here. If you look at it, is going to be, I'm going to give this away. I'm going to give this away to somebody who turned in their homework already. Now, this was not advertised. This was not like anything that was said. This is just an extra special thing that I'm doing just because I want to just say for that, those people who did the extra and like got their homework done and are early, this is a chance that we can
very cool
do something kind of special. So you can't see what I'm doing, but you just have to trust me that I have all the entries. There are actually 239 entries that are in here, and I'm going to pull a random winner, and I'm going for it right here. Okay. Okay, view one entry. Okay, this is it. It is for Jeff Wells. If you are watching Jeff Wells, this is for you. I'm going to type your name into this. Jeff Wells.
Congratulations, Jeff.
Yes. Yeah, so anyways, that was just a special thing that I thought of kind of last minute, but wanted to just do that. That's just a special thing. But guys, it is Q&A time. We're going to pull Diana up because I know that you guys have more of your questions directed for her today. So Diana, thank you for being here. And you guys ask your questions in the chat. Me and Peter will be here to try to help monitor them and
yeah,
say them out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
I don't know if there were any that came through earlier that weren't able to be seen, because I know Diana did a great job of going through while the chat was happening.
Yeah.
You're flying.
Tons of questions in there already.
For sure. All right, I see one right now. What type of bristle brushes do you use?
Well, I use Princeton brushes and made for acrylics. So they're acrylic fiber brushes. Jed uses Princeton Catalyst. Is that right? I use Princeton Snap, but they're both made of an acrylic fiber because bristles absorb water and they get really flabby and soft. So that's my quick and easy answer is any brush that's made for acrylics is probably really good.
Very cool.
It's a good brush.
Diana's painting, what was the surface?
Oh, let me get the painting. I'll be right there. I'm going to show it to you.
Very cool.
It is a masonite. Oh, here we go. It's a masonite board that's on a cradle. It sort of looks like a canvas, but it's a flat masonite. And I think these are called Da Vinci Ultra Smooth.
Awesome.
And they come really smooth, but I put a little tiny thin layer of gesso on them just to rough them up a little tiny bit. I just, when I'm painting small, I don't like the canvas texture. So that's just a personal thing. You can paint on canvas if you want. It's all good.
Awesome. Diana, how did you discover using that shaper that you use?
I bought a shaper about 25 years ago or 20 years ago. I forget. But when I use a palette knife, I tend to run my knuckles through the paint and smear everything up. And when I found the shaper, I bought it initially just to mix paints on my palette with. And then I got lazy and just started putting the paint down on my canvas. And I thought, oh, that really puts it down very nicely and very much like a palette knife, except I can hold it more like a brush and don't drag my fingers in the paint. Um,
Very
that's it.
cool.
But I don't put it on many materials list because it's really optional. People, I mean, it works just like a brush and you
Mhm.
don't need to buy it. It's not very expensive, but you honestly don't need to have one to make your paintings have beautiful paint on them. So
Cool. So, we have a bunch of questions here, Dinah. For the sake of time, do you want to try to answer in like 1 or 2 sentences?
yeah, I'll try.
Um,
I'll
awesome.
try to be brief.
For sure. Okay, what is the exact name of Diana's paint?
I use golden heavy body. That's it.
Awesome. What were the colors you used for your sparkle water?
White with a touch of yellow.
Perfect. What brush should you use for the light streaks if you don't have the shaper?
Just use any wide brush. Make sure it's dry when you put the paint on it and that the paint doesn't have water in it. And you just use a light touch so it doesn't smash the paint down onto your canvas. It just needs to lightly drag across.
Excellent.
Practice on something old first.
Chris Rogers, are there separate submission spaces per lesson or will they all be in the same place? They will all be in the same place.
Yeah, you have
and
3 entry.
Yep.
It's the same form. There are 3 different categories in there. So just click the category for it. And there are only 3 submissions per person. So just don't think that you can change it or add another picture later. Just put in the right picture the first time.
Yeah. Any tips on shaping rocks?
You need to really look at the form of the rock and the planes of the rock, the surfaces, that one facing the sky, the side, and the shadow, and forget about all the different colors in the rocks. Just find, the light, the middle, and the dark, and keep it kind of angular. And so it won't look like a potato. Mine look like potatoes when I try to make them round.
Awesome. M. Smith asks, how do you choose the base color?
It's kind of just what I feel at the moment. That had a lot of green, so I put something warm and lively in there so it wouldn't be too cold.
Yeah.
That was my reasoning on that, but it changes painting to painting.
How do you keep your colors so vibrant? Mine seem to get so muddy.
I mix my paints in a color wheel and leave them in the color wheel and try to do the mixing on the painting. But if your paints are getting muddy on the painting, let the painting dry first. But when I mix in a color wheel, instead of splotting my little colors all over the palette, it gets way less muddy on the palette.
Yeah. And we have a video about that, guys, on our YouTube channel. That's been a huge lifesaver for a lot of people. So if you're interested, go look on our channel. There's a video about how Diana organizes her palette. Do you use a limited palette when not doing demos?
I do. I got so addicted to how beautiful the paintings come out and how cohesive they are with a limited palette. But I've been using a very limited palette for years, just not quite that limited. And I may add a quick, like if I'm using a lot of purple, I may add a quick purple to it just to save time. But mostly it's just 4 or 5 colors and that's it.
Awesome.
They just come out so much more cohesive.
Okay, let's see. Will this landscape challenge be permanently entered into the library?
Yes, it will be.
Yeah.
Good.
For those of you that don't know, the library is part of our membership. It's like a big collection of lessons from past classes and stuff like that. What is your favorite gesso?
I use Utrecht gesso, a professional. It's really thick and pasty, and I really love it thick. Some people don't like it thick, though. Some people like it thin and watery and smooth. So it's Liquitex has a really nice thinner gesso, but I like the thick, so I can thin it down or make it textural.
Awesome. How thick do you tend to put the paint on? Your paint seemed wet for so long.
I'm fortunate to live in a very damp world in Portland,
Yeah.
and it was raining. I also paint in the basement where it stays a consistent temperature, but I have a nice ball of paint on the end of my brush. I don't just scratch it on. I really pick up a ball of paint. You can tell it's thick enough for, or at least I can tell mine is thick enough when it goes down smooth, when I can feel it buttery and not scratchy.
Awesome. Very practical tip. Thank you, Diana.
Hmm.
So beautiful. Forgive if you already said it, but what size was your wooden panel?
12 by 16.
Perfect. There's that question. Mary Wills says if Jeff Wells doesn't respond, Mary Wills is pretty close to the same name.
Really close.
You guys have a great sense of humor. I had trouble with existing colors coming up when painting wet on wet and adding a second layer. How do you prevent this?
Well, if you don't want the layer underneath to come up, let it dry. If it's not drying fast enough, use a hair dryer.
There you go. Yeah, if you guys have seen like some of Jed's and Diana's demos, they use a hair dryer and just mute their mic while they dry the paint. Chris Rogers, when pre-mixing, do you keep your transparent and opaque separate?
No. Some people do. It's just the main opaque one on my palette is white. The other colors are quite transparent, so it really doesn't matter. Once I start lightening with white, it becomes opaque.
Awesome.
Jennifer asks, could we see your final painting again?
I don't know if it'll all fit.
Yes, there it is. There it is. All right. Beautiful.
There we go.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Love it.
I'm sure it will be posted. I sent a copy of it, so I'm sure it will be posted on.
So I don't know if you answered this already, but Chris asks, is the smooth surface helpful?
I really like my brush marks to show. And so, yes, in that way, I love a beautiful brush mark, and the smooth surface really helps show that.
Awesome.
Teresa says, do you ever overwork your paintings? You seem to definitely know you're done.
I overwork all the time. And, the great advice for not overworking your painting is to know what you're going for in the beginning, know what you want, and refer back to that often so that you don't just end up going generic. Like if you want it loose, throughout your painting time, say, I'm keeping it loose. And when you start tightening up, it's the time to throw the brushes down and walk away. The other one is to stop the minute you start feeling tired, because a tired painter will put tired little brush strokes all over their painting because they think, I can do it. I can keep going. I can finish. Just stop. Take a break, rest, and then come back and remind yourself what it was you wanted to say in the first place.
That's really
great
good
advice.
Here's a little bit more complicated question, but Melanie asked, could you go over the rules for painting reflections on water? Line it short, how to measure how big they should be. Is that, I don't know. That's a little complicated, but
I think you should refer to if you're using a reference photo, refer to that, like really measure it. Take a look at, really look at it. If you're working from life, if you're out there standing in front of water, get out your paintbrush and measure how long is the reflection compared to the thing that it's reflecting. Really do your homework, really measure and look for yourself, because there's no given rule. It just depends on how many waves, how ripply the water is, how far back the item is from the water. So you really have to hone up your observation skills.
Here's a question I just want to answer real quick. Leslie asked, confused by membership is it the same as subscribing on YouTube? No. So yes, please do subscribe. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, that's wonderful. Do that. And every time we have a video that we do publicly or we post something, you'll have access to it here. But we have a private membership. So what we do is we have a whole separate thing that has actually all sorts of in-depth teaching and instruction and a wonderful community of people that are part of it. And we're actually going to be opening up the doors for membership on Friday. It's not open all the time. It's just kind of like a few times through the year we open up the doors. That's actually going to start on Friday, but it's different than YouTube. Like, it's a totally different thing. I mean, we're giving you a picture of what it's like on the inside, but this is not the same as what the membership is. So
there's so much
question.
content. You can't even believe how much content there is in the membership. It's great. It's really great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, Peter, I know you've got some more starred, so I'm letting you take back over.
Yeah, sounds good. How do you prepare your color mixing knowing the acrylic will dry darker, aka color shifting?
I mix my colors to the color that I'm seeing, and then because the paints stay wet on my Stay Wet palette and they're drying on my painting, I will just simply look at the difference and adjust on my palette as I paint in layers. So I'll just put a next layer on that's a slightly lighter. It's really not a big deal, and you get used to it, and pretty soon you don't even realize you're doing it.
There you go. Cool. Do you put a varnish or top coat on your works?
Everything that I'm keeping or selling or giving away, everything that I want to be permanent, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Because acrylics can be damaged, and acrylics are very open. Their molecular structure is open until you seal them. So you need to varnish them. Yeah. With acrylic varnish, either spray or paint on. But if they're going to be permanent, you need to varnish.
Cool.
So.
Do you use mediums and glazes ever?
Yes. When it's really hot and dry out, when I'm plein air painting, I can put a slow dry medium in my paints. When I really have a whole section of painting that is slightly the wrong value or slightly the wrong temperature, I'll glaze over that portion. I'm not at all afraid of putting a good glaze over something if it's wrong. I'll do anything if it's wrong to fix it.
Awesome. Jennifer asks, what is a Stay Wet palette? So if you go to the dashboard over at landscapeworkshop.com, we have an FAQs at the bottom. And one of those talks about the Stay Wet palette, what it is, why it's important, and how to set it up, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but I put at the bottom of every page, except for the very first one, the start here and the submission page, every other page has a frequently asked questions section at the bottom, and you can go through it and it will give you links to all sorts of videos that are there that will be helpful, because like varnish, all these, there's a lot of questions that we get regularly, and we've made videos for them because we know that it's such a common question. So go there and you'll find actual videos that you can watch and get a little bit more insight and a little bit more depth on these questions.
Awesome.
Yep.
I'm going to, what do you think? How many more questions should we take, Jed?
I think we should be pretty much done, but you guys, I see pretty much, I think we got through all the questions that I can see that weren't a repeat. A lot of times, like, there's a question that is asked and then we're answering it and then somebody asks it before we get to the original answer. But you guys, thank you so much for being here. Diana, again, thank you. You are incredible and wonderful. And I want to just quickly say, Friday, you can still see my screen. Friday, be back here, guys, 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern time. You are loved and believed in. We are so thankful for you. And yeah. Thank you again, Diana. So amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Friday, I'll be teaching and Jed will be painting. So come back.
Yes, atmosphere on Friday. And Willow has to say bye to everybody too.
Hi, Willow.
All right, bye, everybody. Love you.
All right, love you guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thursday, we'll see you Friday.